All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Goats and Unicorns podcast, episode 2. I'm your host, Zach Betzel, here with my co-host, Landon Willard. Today, we are going to be talking about leadership and how that kind of the complex system, or whatever you want to say, character trait of leadership, and what creates good leaders, bad leaders. And ultimately, hopefully, you guys can take away something useful that you can take back to your life, to your business, to your job, your employment, whatever it is, your relationship with a significant other, and ultimately be a better leader. Because at the end of the day, leaders are the guys making a lot of money and living overall the quality of life that we like to talk about here, right? The GOAT life, the greatest life of all time, right? Life that's so good that, you know, it's just like you look back and you're like, dang, how did I end up doing this, right? And it's those little steps along the way. So, let's go ahead and dive into it.
All right. Okay. I'm excited for this episode. I think it'll be good. My quick 2 cents. Being a leader, that's a very, you could say broad or complex topic, or really open-ended.
Yeah.
Because, we talk a lot about business here on the podcast, but, we're both big advocates for self-improvement, for
big time
life in general, for family life, for, being involved in your community and things like that, I think. So I think being a leader, in the broad sense of applying that to multiple different applications of your life. Yep. I think is really important.
Big time. And what do you think? Like, I think about kind of I sometimes like to think in macro, like the macro of like the world at large, or like kind of society and whatever you want to call it, like the society norms and things like that. And I feel like there is, first of all, one of my opinions is that society is not breeding leaders at all. And that you really now more than ever have to really, like, if you want to develop leadership qualities, you as a person, whether you are 10 years old listening to this podcast or you are, 80 years old, for the 80-year-olds listening to this podcast, they're going to understand this principle exactly. But like, if there is somebody who wants to become a good leader, they're not going to learn it in school these days, or they're not going to learn it from modern day sports. Absolutely. You and I both grew up playing different sports and stuff. And I feel like there was a lot of leadership qualities and things that were kind of bred into us, right, that I don't think kids are getting these days. We're both parents now, our kids are young, but I've really, it's something that I've had to even focus on quite a bit, even though there was quite a bit of work being done from adult leaders and authority figures in my life, that I was like, hey, great. Like, that helped me a lot become a leader. But nowadays, dude, people, first of all, like I said, they don't want to become, it's either they don't want to become leaders, or they just think it's naturally going to happen, but they don't work on it. And then for the opposite side of things, like, people don't want to be led. Right. In my opinion. I don't know. It's been interesting, like, as we've scaled our businesses, and I'm sure you probably felt this way too, is like, as you've scaled your businesses, like finding people, quality people that are okay, like being led, and having somebody talk to them candidly with candor, and like, even though it should always be done with kindness, but you can definitely have those upfront conversations. That's something I've had to get a lot better at, because I always want everybody to like me. But when you're a leader, sometimes not everybody's going to like you, right?
Right. You can't please everyone.
Exactly. Which is hard for me.
Right. Me too, honestly.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I think you said something really important, and probably, to the majority of our audience, millennials especially, I would say, don't like to be led. Yeah. Have a hard time with the boss, don't like being told what to do. I think that's just kind of a general stereotype for that.
So what do you do as somebody, what do you think, in your opinion, like, what do you do with somebody who is like, you're trying to lead a group of people to a desired outcome, right?
Right.
But there's certain people on your team that just don't want to be led.
Right. I was going to ask you the same question, so I'd love to hear what you have to say after. But in my opinion, I think being a leader doesn't always mean standing at the podium and giving, motivational speeches and trying to powwow your team into a direction. I think a lot of times, it can mean just having a really good personal relationship. And if it's in this case an employee that has a hard time with a leader or a boss, and you're trying to push, or that's what a leader's trying to do. And we'll talk about this in a second, but not in a overbearing, overpowerful,
right,
forceful way, but more of a like, hey, let's both work together to get you and, in a business example, this company as a whole in this direction.
Yep.
To help us both see success. And so I think being able to just the ability to connect in our interpersonal relationships with our employees is it can't be overlooked, and I think that's where it starts. Yeah,
and it is interesting, and maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit as far as like how do you separate making sure that relationship doesn't become too much of a friend, a friend to where now people start getting taken advantage of, or to the point where you really don't want to piss that person off by asking them a certain thing. But we can talk about that in a little bit. But what I was going to say, what I have found from, the little bit of leadership experience that I have, I guess. I mean, I've always been in some sort of, I feel like, leadership role, even from an early age. It's been interesting. But to me, I think vision is a huge thing, huge job of the leader. And hear me out on this, that when you have a leader that has a massive vision versus a leader who doesn't, or maybe has a big vision, but doesn't articulate it very well either. Like, which person are you much more likely to follow and want to help and like do good work for and all that kind of stuff too? Like I've heard there's like a statistic out there that talks about how millennials and Gen Z or whatever it is, a certain percentage of them, they want what's called an emotional paycheck in addition to a monetary paycheck. And a lot of times they'll actually weigh that emotional paycheck not necessarily higher, but in an equal status. So let's say, you have a job opportunity for a millennial. I have a job opportunity for a millennial. Let's say my job opportunity pays $25 an hour. Yours pays $20 an hour, but the vision that you paint for that person and the impact and stuff that you're going to have in the world and all that, like that emotional type of stuff. Oftentimes you find the person choosing less money, but they get the emotional paycheck, you know what I mean? And so I think it's really important. And I know we talk a lot about like the unicorn equation, which is kind of my coined little 5-step sequence of like how to live an amazing life. But that first step is so important of like creating a vision, because not only is it going to be the vision that you live your life by, right? Where I always tell people, like, you should sit down and really, really write out, like, what does a perfect day look like? What does a perfect week look like? What does a perfect month in a perfect year and a perfect decade, right? Like, you can take it out as long as you want. What does a perfect life look like, and construct it from the ground up. But also, if you're in a company, and this is something that I've struggled with too, but what does a perfect company look like? Like, what is everybody doing? How's everybody interact? And who are the people that we have? Because then that can boil down into all the areas of everybody's position, right? If you're in HR, like, you're going to hire people that are, most likely going to glob onto the vision and see the vision, right? If you're in operations, you're going to make sure that customers are taken care of and that fulfillment and delivery is getting taken care of in a way that, it coincides with the vision, right? If you're in product development, if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, whatever it is, right? So I think that vision piece and being a visionary in a way. And here's the thing. I think being a visionary, sometimes people are born with it. I think that's something that I was kind of born with as a gift, but I've also had to strengthen that muscle over time too. I think people can learn, especially if they want to be a good leader. You should, in my opinion, learn to become a big visionary. And because at the end of the day, I heard a quote, I think it was from Ed Milet, and he might've gotten it from somebody else, but he said, you have to have a vision so big that the visions of every other person that is in your organization, they can complete their vision and fulfill their dreams within your giant vision, right? And I think where leaders, and especially leaders that I've had issues with in the past, have gone wrong is because my vision for my life was bigger than the vision they were giving to me as far as how big their organization was going to be or what it was going to do, and that emotional paycheck side of things and all that kind of stuff. Because I like the emotional, the cool impact side of things too.
Well, and how you specifically fit into their vision.
Exactly. So imagine it like, I look at it as like a triangle. Like, my triangle was wider than theirs. this. And therefore, that's why we butted heads a lot, because I was like, hey, we could take this thing so much bigger or do this much more stuff.
Or not even take this whole thing so much bigger, but me personally, this is how I want to grow and develop.
Exactly.
And if there's not enough room,
this is what I want to do in my life.
I want to go within the company, then it's not a good fit.
Exactly. I think that's, not to go off on a super side tangent, but that's why I think I was always destined to be an entrepreneur, and why I'm thriving now, being the owner of multiple companies as opposed to working for somebody else, is because I always would find myself in that I would always hit that wall where it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm never going to accomplish what I want out of my life here.
Right.
And now that I've got basically the reins off and free to roam and do my own thing and come up with my own ideas and let the marketplace decide, it's a much more fulfilling part of my end. But I have to continually remind myself, that's why we're talking about it today, as far as like, what do good leaders do? Right. So those are kind of my thoughts on
there's a lot there, man. We need to get into it before we keep, but I had a lot of thoughts on your thought, which I think was great. But I think, again, you said something there a little while ago about being a friend, and man, especially as a boss or as a business owner or whatever that dynamic is, when you're in a business setting and you are put into a leadership role, I think you have to be really careful, because your job is not to be a friend.
Yeah.
Because here's the problem. Friends, I mean, this is not what good friends do, but let's be realistic here. Most friends do not say what needs to be said. They're there to support and to listen and to be a good friend, but it's just an interesting dynamic. I think being a boss is almost more of a parent role, where the same thing as a parent. Your job is not to be their friend. Your job is to tell them, hey, look, this is what's actually going on.
Yep.
And this is what I think is the right direction, or this is where you're at. You're not here. You're here.
Yeah.
Those types of things.
Almost like a mentor.
Yes. More of it, and hence the leading part.
Yep.
Which I think, in a leadership role, that should be the ultimate goal.
Yeah. With
an employee, you want your employees to be in a position where they can grow within the company and fulfill their vision for themselves.
Yep.
Just like you said. And so I think, as a leader, that communication and that joint seeking, working towards the goal is so huge. Being not being too much of a friend. And not sugarcoating things, obviously being professional and polite, but saying, hey, look, I care about you a lot. I care about your success. I also, care about, what we're doing as a company. And I think you can fulfill this role really good, because I think you have such a great skill set and you can fulfill on this. Let's work towards this together.
Right.
I think that goes a lot farther than both other sides of the spectrum of being too nice and being a friend and letting your friend employees walk all over you and take advantage of you in a way, or being just a total hard-nosed stickler, drill sergeant boss. Yeah. Because those are both two evils. And I think finding that magic balance in the middle of communion and working effectively together is the magic.
And that's where, and for what it's worth, and I'm not sitting here on this podcast professing to be the greatest leader in the world. I know I've got tons of flaws that I constantly have to work at, right? But I think one of the reasons...
That's why we talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, if there's anyone listening that is, in some sort of a leadership role or something, I mean, for what it's worth, what I have found to be effective is going, again, back to that vision side of things, and then kind of coupling it with what you were just saying is like, I like to know what, almost like in every single one of my interviews with a potential employee, I ask them like what their vision is. And if they don't have one, it's not the end of the world, but I tell them like, hey, look, like this is something that we're going to work on as like a personal vision, because at the end of the day, again, it goes back to like, if I can connect with that person and hold them to a high enough standard, which I'll talk about this cool matrix about connection and standards in a little bit. But if I can connect with someone and hold them to a high enough standard to say, hey, look, like you told me that this was a vision that you wanted to create. I'm giving you a vehicle by working for me in this company to literally bring about that exact vision for your life. Right. And if I then, as the leader, don't hold them to that standard and I'm too buddy with them, they're not ultimately going to fulfill their vision. Therefore, I've failed as a leader, right? And more than likely, the mission that we're on as a company is not going to be fulfilled on either, right? Whereas, again, like you said too, if you're too much of a stickler where I'm just like, remember your vision, and like,
Right.
and I'm not like doing it from a place of love of like, hey, look, like I genuinely want to see you succeed. I'm just like, just do it, because it's also going to help our company.
Right.
And that's all I care about is company profits or something like that.
Right.
Then I'm also going to get a big rebellious, coup on my hands where people are, just like, oh, Zach doesn't care about us at all. Like he's just like pushing numbers, which I think, I don't know about you, but I've worked for somebody like that where it felt like all they cared about, like all I was a number.
Exactly.
And that was not fun either. And I was, naturally kind of rebellious,
Yeah.
So
Clearly, and it makes sense. And nobody wants to be in a position where they feel like that. I think people, when it comes to being led, they just want to feel like they're actually cared about, and in not a fake, fluffy way.
Yeah.
They want, not everybody feels like they need to have like a life-changing experience at work or whatever. But I think people want to feel like they're cared for, and that their interests are also in the the company's interests, or that the company is interested in them and their development as a person. And so I think if you're in a leadership role, then again, just the ability to connect and show genuine care for your people is
And what do you think about that? Like, as far as like the way that I've done it mainly is trying to get a understanding of their vision for their life, and literally being like, how much money do you want to make? What kind of car do you want to have? What kind of house do you want to have? Where do you want to live? Who do you want to spend time with? What do you want to spend your free time doing? All that stuff, right? Like going back to that, creating a vision for their life. Because to me, that's one of the best gifts I think that I could give somebody, is to get them to have clarity on it, right? I think that's one of the biggest things that has gotten me to where I am, is like, actually one of my mentors and one of the people I look up to the most, he gave me one of the best, if not the best compliment I've ever gotten in my life. He said, I don't think I've ever had somebody that I've worked with that can come up with an idea or a vision of something that they want to do and get so crystal clear on it, and then just go execute on it so quickly, because it's so crystal clear what you're trying to create, and then you just go do it. And that was one of the best compliments I've ever had. And so on the flip side of that, like me stepping into the role of a leader, I want to help teach that to my employees, because I know that there's that age-old saying from, I think, Zig Ziglar, where he says, if you help enough people get what they want, you can have whatever you want, right? And so, he was this salesperson, and I think might have even had some multi-level marketing stuff in there, because that's a very classic MLM pitch, is like, recruiting and stuff. And we used to do door-to-door sales together, where we would recruit downlines and all that kind of stuff. And so there was that was a big saying, right? If you help enough people get what they want, then you can get what you want. But I think it's very true,
element
right?
of truth to that.
For sure is. It's gotta be. It's very true, in the sense that, if you help somebody get crystal clear on a vision, and then you say, hey, I will help you achieve this and our business, and we're going to set this thing up in a way to where you're going to be able to do that. Like I bring that up in most of our company huddles, because I'm like, want people to remember that, like, when it comes to how much I pay people and their tasks and everything like that, like, I'm trying to tie it back to their vision, trying to tie it back to their dream life, because I know that this company is going to grow if I help them achieve their dreams. I'll be able to achieve that massive vision, that massive dream that I have, And so I don't know, to me, that's one of the best ways that I've found to be able to do it. But again, I don't know everything, and I'm learning along the way and stuff.
Well, I think that way of painting the picture for the people that you're leading is perfect. The one thing that I would add to that, as far as painting the vision for them of the car, the house, the lifestyle that they want to live, is also the non-material side of that. Like, what type of character development that do you want to have? Like, what are the important traits, or what are your skills? What are the things that you want to get better at? As far as a skill set and a character, person's character. And so I think that's huge too. And I see that in our company of, trying to find somebody that has certain values that kind of fits not necessarily the mold that we're trying to build, but just somebody who can thrive in that environment.
Yeah. I like it. So check this out. There's this matrix that I learned from a
Yeah, I want to hear about this.
Yeah. No, this goes a lot really well. It was a live event that I went to, and there was this guy who ran, I don't know if the company was existing or if it had kind of like wrapped up, but he would do this thing called the undercover millennial. And what he would do is he would get hired out by these big companies. This is really cool. I love this because I think, I don't know if it'd be cool to see like a show or see some of the footage that he came up with, but he would literally wear a hidden camera in his tie, and companies would hire him to basically go undercover and go and start like talking with all the other workers, like on, if you talk about like, the C-suite executives all the way down to like the most menial,
Sure.
Kind of just entry level position,
Right.
And he would go talk to all of them and see like what they thought about their bosses, their managers, what they thought about the company and this and how they were being treated and all this stuff. And then he would take that footage and just kind of a write up and everything and kind of his feedback back to those C-suite executives or those owners of the company and stuff. And he would massively help improve like company culture and different things like that, and help people with their leadership. I was like, dude, that is awesome. So cool, man. And I wish I could like see some of that footage, or that they would make like a reality show about it, or like a documentary or something. That would be so sick.
Yeah, exactly.
But he shared this matrix that I thought was really cool. And so he had 2 columns. In one of the columns, he had connection. And then in the other column, he had standards. And then there was like these 4 levels of like the 4 levels of leadership or something like that. And then, or it's like these combinations of the connection and standards, and then what it caused in employee behavior. And so at the very bottom, you've got, so he would grade, he would just say, for easy purposes, he would say high or low in each of the columns. So he said when communication or connection is low and standards are low, that causes just complete disengagement. So if you're a leader and you're supposed to lead me, and you show very low connection to me, you don't have any desire of connecting with me as a human, like we talked about being a friend and helping them and whatever, and you don't hold me to any standards, I'm just going to be completely disengaged. I'm like, whatever, this guy doesn't care. You know what I mean? And then you've got the guy that is, you've got the high connection and low standards. That's more of like the friend, right?
Yes.
So we connect really well.
But I don't hold you to expectations.
But I don't hold you to expectations, and I don't hold I don't hold the standards or anything. Yeah. And what that causes is entitlement. So that causes employees to be entitled. And then you've got in the column of what would it be? So low connection, high standards. That's where you've got the hard ass that's just like numbers or whatever. And what that causes in people is rebellion. Yeah. Right. How exactly. Spot on is that, right? Yeah. And then when you have the high of high degree of connection, high degree of standards, that's what causes respect. And that is the label for that one. I just remember the label for that one was mentor. And so that was like, the idea was that like at any given time, you want to make sure and connect with your employees enough to where they know that you genuinely do care about their well-being and their happiness and helping them achieve that vision, as we talked about. And then you also want to hold them to the standards. And my issue where I flaw as a leader is I flaw on the friend side, which causes a lot of entitlement and taking advantage, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had to learn. I just had a conversation this morning with a guy that's just now onboarding with us, and won't know names or anything, but I just had to tell him, I said, look, something that I haven't been very good at as a leader in the past is speaking very directly to people. And so I'm going to do that right now. And then I just spoke very directly to him, and he was totally fine with that because I've already been buddy with him, and he knows that I'm a very caring guy. I'm kind of the big teddy bear that wants to be friends with everybody, right? But I've told him, I said, look, and I think, for me, that was kind of a big step for me to recognize that and to just, say that straight up to him and be like, look, this is something that I've been terrible at in the past, but I'm trying to get better. So here goes. And just like lay it on the table. And I wasn't mean or anything, but it was just like, I had to be very straightforward with like what it is exactly that I expect of him if I'm going to hire him. You know what I mean? And so that was cool. It was an interesting conversation too, because the whole time I'm like, my heart's like beating all fast and stuff. And I'm just like, this is so uncomfortable.
We're not going to be friends anymore.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable because I'm, like I said, I'm used to being the guy that everyone loves, you know? And so anyway, yeah, it's been interesting. It's an interesting journey to learn how to become a good leader.
That's so funny. What's funny, in one of my companies, I feel like I've actually had the problem of being low.
The opposite?
Yeah.
Low connection, high standards.
Part. Yeah, because here's been the tricky part. As we've been trying to scale, and we're up to around flirting with the number of 25 and 30 employees.
Yeah.
And we've also kind of gotten to the point where we've put a lot of systems and processes in place to where the business is a little more self-functioning with with our management team. Yeah, without me having to do everything and do all the work, and so obviously that's been a huge blessing, and a great a great the process has been awesome, and what we've been able to get to as far as where the business is awesome. No complaints there. But yeah, I've definitely seen I mean, maybe it's because there's not high connection, but I haven't seen like a crazy amount of rebellion or disengagement. But I would say that's as a business, you can kind of get a sense for it, and I just recognize that it is very different than it was when we were operating, 6 people, 8 people, and I was one of them. And, we were right in the mix, and we're all grinding and whatever.
Yep.
The energy is different. And so I love that matrix, and it's been something that I've been thinking about the last little while. Man, I want to, I want to set some goals and try to figure out some ways that we can not only rekindle that, but just get the business in a really positive energy place. Not that it's not, but I think there's room for improvement there, and so I love that.
Yeah, it's good. I love that matrix. Like literally, the last job that I had before I went full-fledged entrepreneur mode, I would bring that up to the guys that I was working for. I literally brought that thing up one time because I was sitting there trying to be a leader, and I was also like, they also shied more on the side of low connection, high standards. Yeah. So we had very much like numbers, always pushing down our throat, critical drivers, all this kind of stuff. We call them the measures of success. And so that was being pushed down our throat all the time. I said, hey guys, like, what if we took a day to go to like Top Golf or something with the team and just showed a little bit of goodwill and, like invested in that side. The people. Yeah. Invested in the connection side, right? Yeah. Because we've obviously, they know that we are going to harp on them till the cows come home, which again, very uncomfortable for me. It was a very hard time in my life where I felt like I was being forced to be a type of leader that I wasn't, and I did not know how to navigate it very well. And I'm not saying that I did not do a great job of doing that either, but I learned a lot along the way too. And I tried to do my best and navigate it the best I could, but and they said, like, I think that's a good idea. And we ended up, just putting some things on the schedule that would allow that connection side to kind of raise up a little bit more. And I remember it always was a big boost to, morale and camaraderie and stuff. Yeah. And it's like, I had another good analogy that I remembered too, when I said the whole, like, investing in going to like a Top Golf or investing in some of that camaraderie. It really is like, we obviously talk dollars and cents, financials all the time in business and stuff, but it really is kind of like, I've heard it described as like, you make deposits of like the connection side of things, so that when you can ask for a withdrawal from the bank account on the standards, that people keep them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and there's a fine balance, because if you're not making enough deposits, right, like just like a normal bank account, you don't deposit enough money, you can't take enough money out, right? So if you need a certain amount of output and production, meaning standards, right, numbers being hit and revenue coming in and all that kind of stuff, you have to be making enough deposits. You make too many deposits, and the withdrawals are going to be funky, because again, people are going to be being like sitting on the high horse being like, oh yeah, we're bros, we're buddies, we're friends, Yeah. But yeah, those are some good analogies. That's great. And good things, I guess, that I've learned over time and observed from all the different jobs that I've had, and then now being a boss myself, I guess. Yeah. Trying to get trying to get implemented the best I can.
That's funny. So this probably isn't the right question for you, but one of the things that we wanted to talk about, we probably all had an overbearing boss, or a kind of a macho power, maybe not power hungry, but just coming from a position of
holding the high standards.
Holding the high standards,
Yeah.
but from a power hungry place instead of, we probably all had that person, that figure, above us in whatever position.
Yeah.
What is your perspective from, being the employee side of that?
That's a good question.
And how does that make you feel, and your ability to grow as a person and develop character, and obviously, the vision part of it, but also from an employer side, what are the pitfalls, or what what are the stumbling blocks that allow you to fall into a position like that?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So from an employee standpoint, the funny thing is like, I'm sitting here thinking like, man, what is the solution? Because I did find myself working for people that, like I said, they were very high. And isn't that matrix great? Because if you boil it down to those two things, connection and standards, like
that's simple.
It's super simple, right? Because we talk about all this like performance and this and that and motivation and like you said, rah, blah, and then like all that stuff. But when you boil it down to connection and the standards, it's really good. So yes, I have worked for people who have been very high on the standards, very low on the connection. And it's almost like at that point, I'm not saying this is the answer, but what I did naturally as an employee is I even shied more towards the connection side. So I would always try to build the connection with them. And I think it worked, and it made that relationship pretty harmonious, because it at least made me feel good, because I was like, okay, like I'm pretty well connected with these folks and like pretty good friends with them. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm not annoyed every time that they ask me to do something, because I know like we're pretty good friends. But for the ones who did not have that, whether it's an ability or just like they didn't go that route of being really good friends with them, they would be like pretty burnt out pretty fast of having to constantly, report and stuff. So I guess from an employee standpoint, like if you ever find yourself working for leaders like that, I mean, I think at the end of the day, what we have to realize is that most of the time, everybody's trying their hardest, right? And sometimes people just need it brought to their attention. So I think, the way that I tried to handle it, again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily the exact way to go about it, but the way I would try to handle it was going to my bosses and going to my leaders and say, hey, like, this is kind of how either I've been feeling or the team's been feeling or something like that. Like when I was kind of in that management role of managing a team and stuff, what would you guys say if we XYZ or blah, blah, blah. I was wondering if there was something I could share with you that I learned at a conference a long time ago that might be able to help us grow the company, right? And like, again, me being in that position, trying to tie it to what their vision was, right? I'm like always trying to tie everything to a vision of like, hey, if you guys want this company to grow and be massive, what if we did this and tried it, and would you at least hear me out? Most people, most reasonable human beings are going to say, yeah, absolutely. Like, let's hear it out, right? And I remember when I did share that whole matrix thing with them in that story that I was mentioning earlier, it didn't go over super well. Like it wasn't some epiphany moment where they were just like, oh yeah, that makes a bunch of sense. Like it kind of, I think it wasn't received super well. That could have been the delivery on my end, or it could have just been the character flaws on their end,
right?
Of not being super open-minded to change or super open-minded to somebody else having a different idea or whatever than them. So that's one thing, but that's something I can't control as an employee, or I couldn't control at the time. It was just like, hey, is what it is. I gave it my best shot. Now flipping over to the employer side, what was the question on the employer side? It was like, how can you avoid the pitfalls, I think, of like falling into that?
How do you prevent, what are the steps that you take to prevent yourself from being in that position?
That's a good question, because I've even felt like that at times where you get so involved in like, we talk about this owner operator thing, right? Where it's like, you want to be a business owner working on your business, not in your business. You don't want to be an operator in your business. But at the same time, you're growing a company from scratch. You got to be the operator.
You got to put in the work.
You got to put in the work. And so I have felt myself sometimes getting so lost in the day-to-day grind and tasks that I don't feel very high on the connection side, or and sometimes I don't even feel high on the standard side, which then causes disengaged employees, right?
Exactly.
So that's the bad part, is because you're just so consumed with what you're trying to shoulder that it's hard to remember that you have employees that you can lean on and everything like that. So I think what's important is to at least bake into your schedule at some point a time that's like planned. At least this is what I've started doing, where you can just take a step back and look at your business from that 30,000 foot overview and say, you know, okay, who do I have? What are all the different things we've talked about that book that I'm reading called Buy Back Your Time, right? What are all the different tasks that I'm working on that I'm super consumed with, and how could I offload some of those tasks to some of these people that are working for me? And especially early on, right? Early on, you don't have, they talk about employees being like specialists and generalists, right? At the very beginning, you don't have the amount of money to hire a specialist, meaning like, hey, I need a marketing person, so I'm going to go spend $90,000 a year on a phenomenal marketer. You don't have that kind of luxury. Yep. You're spending money on generalists, right? Which are like, hey, I kind of need you to do a little bit of everything, right? Yeah. And so when that happens, you got to make sure that even though you probably are the specialist in a lot of different areas, which is what I have felt for the majority of my businesses thus far, right? And we're coming out of that, but that's the majority of my time in business. I have been the specialist and everybody else has been generalists. Now we're getting to the point where we have some ability to delegate to specialties and things like that, which is nice. And that just comes from driving more sales. But I think going back to your question is like, how do you avoid the pitfalls? Is plan some time into your schedule to look at your business as the owner and not the operator, and say, hey, if I got ran over by a bus, I think I brought this up the other day, right? Yeah, or if Zach went out to the woods with no cell phone connection for a month or 2 weeks or whatever time period you want to say, if Zach went out to the woods with no connection to the outside world, could the business survive? The answer, more than likely, more often than not, I would say. So if this is you, it's okay. But more often than not, the answer is going to be no. If you're listening to this right now and you're a business owner, the answer is probably going to be no, and that's okay. But what you need to do at that point is say, why not? Why would it not survive if Zach went out to the woods? Well, it's because this would fall through, and this would fall through, and this problem would occur. Now we start identifying immediate things that probably need some attention. But if you can constantly be thinking, in my opinion, again, this is how I'm building my businesses right now, is thinking about it in the sense of, if Zach weren't here today, right? If Zach weren't here today, would they be able to operate? Would they be able to run? Would content get out the door? Would content get created? Would, leads come in? Would sales be made? All that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the exact answer. That's at least the way that I operate right now, and try to, is like take that step back, especially when you're feeling overwhelmed too, because you can get into some pretty deep thoughts of just like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy. Like, how do I freaking do this? And if you take a step back and think, okay, what needs to happen in order for this thing to run without me? Because at the end of the day, that's most of our dreams. Most of our goals is to be able to own businesses and own cash flow that comes in without our time being used to get it, right? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's what kind of this whole Goes Unicorns thing is about. Anyway, is how do we learn those skill sets, but then how do we implement those skill sets to create that kind of a life for ourselves? And so I don't know. That's my opinion on it. Is to avoid the pitfall of becoming that kind of leader that you don't want to become, is take a step back, see what needs to happen in the business, and then, okay, what type of leader do I need to be to make sure that each of these people can go do these things and to get it done, right? And again, that's where I always like kind of tie it back to that vision, and can then go, and hopefully I've made enough deposits so that when I ask for the withdrawal, that it happens. And if I haven't, then I can know, hey, I got to go make some more deposits. So now you can you can now manage your time as the leader, knowing, do I need to spend more time going and asking for deposits, or do I need to spend more time going and or asking for withdrawals, or do I need to go spend some more time giving deposits while I'm doing the rest of the stuff that I'm doing? Because even when you like spend time connecting with an employee, that usually is a pretty nice like spiritual uplift for yourself as well. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like if you're just in the thick of it, but then you go spend some time just like serving one of your employees and being like, you know, hey, like whatever, having a nice conversation with them, whatever
grab
it is,
some lunch from
grab some lunch,
Yeah.
this, that, whatever, have a nice Zoom call, ask them how life's going, how their family's doing, whatever it is, right? You can spend some time serving them and pouring into their happiness a little bit. Now you're going to feel better, first of all, because anytime you serve somebody, you feel better.
Yeah.
And then also now you're going to be able to be more in a powerful, not that it's like a good, powerful position to be able to ask for that withdrawal of like, hey, let's go make this happen. I've got XYZ on my plate that's really been bogging me down. What if we handed that off to you and blah, 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 whatever it's a raise or whether it's a bonus or this or that or whatever. If you have to incentivize them with money, but sometimes you can just ask for the withdrawal without having to give them some sort of money. Right. So anyway, yeah.
Man, that's solid, dude. There's a lot to unpack there, but that was really good. Yeah, real quick, like we have mentioned the word powerful in actually a negative light throughout this whole episode. But to be perfectly clear, powerful is such, like, to be a powerful leader, like that is such a great thing. And it's powerful not in the sense of egocentric and power hungry, but powerful in the sense of like that's where the real power comes from that genuine care and serving and like that's a true powerful leader. You also talked about one thing I was gonna to answer that question a little bit from the avoiding the pitfalls of becoming the low connection, high standards boss
that causes the rebellion.
Exactly. One way to, just thinking about it, like, and a lot of what you were saying, dude, it really is all about the people. And that's something for me and something that, like a mini pitfall that I've stumbled into, not to the point where it's a huge virus and toxicity in my company, but something like, hey, I'm slightly noticing this. I need to make some improvements here. Talking about the low connection, high standards leader, avoiding the pitfalls of falling into that, just remembering that it's all about the people and serving and, instilling confidence in them and really connecting with them and valuing them as a person and as a friend, but not
it's
from
like
a different perspective.
A mentor. Like, think about it. Like, all of my mentors, I would consider, like, at any given moment you'd be like, oh, are you friends with so and so, and maybe it was a mentor of yours, you'd say absolutely,
yes,
but really the relationship between you was a mentor, right?
It's a mentor and because follower,
exactly. You as the mentee, right, the person who was being mentored, would consider that person a friend, and they more than likely would consider you a friend too. But at the same time, the way they've treated you was, hey, I'm going to connect with you, but I'm also going to hold you to a high standard, so that because I love you and I care for you and I want what's best for you, and you've told me what you want out of life, and I'm going to help you get it. And I think that's the beauty of mentorship in general, and that's the cool part. Like, I've had plenty of mentors in my life. I've now mentored people through Goats and Unicorns, right? And it's cool because I'm not at the level where my mentors are or were when they were mentoring me, but I've helped that person along, and helped other people. And so it's a little bit easier for me to, like, if somebody's paying me to mentor them essentially, right, or coach them or consult them, it's a little bit easier to understand the relationship. But in the employee, I think interaction, it gets lost oftentimes. But I think as leaders, we just need to think about how can we mentor every single person in our organization and mentor them and love on them. But also, a mentor doesn't just love on them and isn't just a friend that's like, oh, like, go ahead and go away from your goal, or go ahead and do that. Like, your best friends truly are the ones that are going to be like that mentor person
hold you accountable.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's a real friend.
And the other thing that you mentioned too was, like, that I like personally is, like, have you ever heard that term servant leadership, right? Yes. It was like from a book or something.
Yes.
But really, like, a lot of people look at leadership as like this pyramid, right? Where it's like the leaders on top and then everybody else is below them. But I've heard that, and I think this is true, is like, if you flip that and it's like everybody's above you and you're at the bottom serving and holding everybody else up. and they are going to be what sustains and holds up your business. So there's that saying that's like, you take care of the people and the people will take care of your business. So as leaders, and especially, going back to what a lot of this podcast is about, which is entrepreneurship and business, as you are scaling a business, should you be focused on spending more time on operating and like the sales and marketing side of things? No, what you should really be doing is pouring into the people, hiring the right people and pouring into them and serving them, and they are going to take care of the sales and the marketing and the fulfillment and the operations and everything, right?
Right.
And that's what I think we get lost on. I do too, all the time.
Yep.
I get lost thinking that I got to be the one out there pushing sales. I got to be the one out there pushing marketing, which is, like we talked about, it's true to a certain extent. But when you are in scale mode, which we are in scale mode right now, like I got to focus. I got to invest in the people, right? And that's what I feel really good about, because I finally start to see that the people are in the right spots, and we got the right people, and things are starting to move in the right direction on that front.
Yeah. And for me personally, I'm a very financially minded person, very profit driven, very I'm a budgeter. Like I'm that type of person.
Yeah.
And so it's a real power struggle for me of like the idea of investing time and money. Like it's going to cost money to invest in your people. Like, hey, and I'm such a cheapskate. Like, hey, doing Topgolf with your guys, doing, buying lunches, buying Jamba Juice for my people whatever.
Once
like
in a while. Putting on that barbecue. You guys put on a barbecue.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Like doing stuff that costs money, like that, you have to think of it as an investment.
It's an investment
that is going to, 10x your productivity.
Exactly.
Like you have to think of it that way, because it is that way.
It is.
And if you're not making those investments, then your business is just going to be in kind of a stagnant mode, and your employees are just going to be in this limbo mediocrity.
Yeah, there's
forever.
that other saying that says where attention goes, energy flows.
Yeah.
So if your attention is on just standards and numbers, that's where all the energy is going to be, and there's going to be that bad juju, rebellious feeling there. If all of your energy, or if your attention goes towards your people and how can you serve them, that energy that creates within the organization is just infectious. People are happy, they're light, right? There was a company, I don't know if you ever heard this story, and this has a little bit to do with money, not so much camaraderie, but money and making sure that employees were paid super well. And this is kind of what I'm trying to create in my businesses right now. But there was a company in Seattle that made a bunch of headlines a few years ago because he took a giant pay cut from, like, he was pulling in like over $1 million a year from his business. It was like a fintech company or something like that. And he took a massive pay cut so that he could raise the minimum wage of all of his employees to a minimum salary of $70,000 a year. Wow. And this was in Seattle, which, I mean, we live in Eastern Washington. We know Seattle is freaking expensive to live in, right?
Yeah.
And but he said the effects were crazy, and it was funny because I'm a capitalist at heart. I do not believe in socialism whatsoever. And there was a bunch of capitalistic people that were telling this guy's like a socialist and blah blah blah. They were actually like speaking pretty down about him, but I think he was genius. And I don't think it was socialism. I think what he was doing was he was just showing them, look, I'm willing to go from $1 million. I think he cut his salary down to like $200,000, which, let's be honest, $200,000 still phenomenal as a founder, right? Yeah. But to actually make the sacrifice of, like, if you are living a $1 million lifestyle and you cut it down by by like 80%, essentially.
Crazy.
Yeah, you take an 80% pay cut so that all of your employees can make a higher minimum wage. Well, he started seeing company profits soar. People were having more babies. They were able to afford their first home for the first time. They were able to get out of debt, pay off student loans, college loans. The camaraderie and the energy, right? So the attention that he put on making sure they were okay financially, right? And I know I'm talking about finances here, but again, it all goes with this guy. This dude is a phenomenal leader for doing this, right? It goes down to that leadership principle. That energy was so infectious that his company, like, literally, I think, like, I can't even remember the number. I don't want to like missay it, but it like 10, for all intents and purposes, it skyrocketed because everybody was happy and they they were taken care of. They didn't feel like they were constantly pinching pennies. So, and I've also thought that too, the more that you can help people achieve, you know, again, those financial goals for their life as well. Like we talk about those intangibles, but the tangible goals as well. It's a balance. It's both. But if you can provide that as a leader, man, dude, you can withdraw a lot, and you can get a lot of productivity out of people, and therefore you will be able to drive that vision forward for whatever it is that vision that you have for your company, how much money you want to make, what type of lifestyle you want to live, cars you drive, house you live in, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, man.
That's
it's almost
awesome.
like you're playing chess, you know, and you got all these different moves on the board and stuff, and you got to make sure everything's running smoothly and stuff. And yeah, it's a wild ride.
That's
man.
a really cool story and crazy experiment.
Like, yeah. Isn't that wild?
Let's try this.
Yeah, I know. And for
so
me
cool.
starting out, like, I mean, I'm not doing as much money as this fintech company was,
Right.
but down the road, and not to go off on a super side tangent on artificial intelligence or anything, but one of the reasons why I'm so stoked for artificial intelligence and why a lot of our employees I am teaching and training to use those tools is because, like, if we can train, you know, like let's say we had 5 employees that were all making 30 grand a year, 40 grand a year, something like that, entry level positions, generalists. But then we could train a certain amount of, or let's say we could chop away 3 of those salaries, but arm those 2 that were standing over to be just as productive as the 5 with things like AI and these automation tools and just setting up your business the right way from the foundation up. You can now pay those employees way more money, and you can have a little bit left over than what you would have paid the 5, right? And that's what I've talked extensively with about my employees, you know, is saying, hey, like, this is the vision for what I'm trying to create. And I'm just like way earlier in the process than like, this fintech company was
Stage 1.
Probably $20-30 million a year in revenue. Right? Like, we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But I think that's the beautiful part about when you have someone with a leader with a good heart on their shoulders that has a massive vision that all of your employees can fit their own vision for their life and can create the life they want to live within the vision that you're painting for them. You can arm them with the right tools and resources to be able to be highly, highly productive so that you can get out of them what you need to get out of them, pay them really, really well. I think that is literally going to be the winning combination for businesses moving forward into this very tumultuous time that we are headed into over the next decade or so. Because let's be honest, if we had started, you know, a company like this back 10, 20 years ago, we'd be killing it by now, right?
Yeah,
but because we're starting it now, it's going to require a little bit more of the leadership side of things. And that's kind of why we're talking about it, right?
Right.
You got people that, you know, don't necessarily love to be led unless it's led the right way. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I have a thought going back to the Matrix, and I want to know what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah.
But adding, because I think this is an interesting add-on with the Matrix, adding almost like a third dimension in a way of potential. I want to know what you think about this from an employer and an employee standpoint. So obviously you have the connection and the standards side of it from both. And this is kind of from an employer and a employee standpoint of being the right fit for the industry, for the specific job. How do you think that plays into effect? And I'll give you an example or 2 examples, I guess. Let's say in your company, you have somebody in you're kind of not in the startup phase. You're past that, but you're in the scaling phase. You have somebody that comes on and they say, hey, Zach, I'm young, I'm ambitious. I want to provide as much value to it as you as I can. And, I get the vision, let's go to the moon, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, that's, and I want to do sales. Let's just for an example, I want to be in sales for you.
Okay.
Or you have a gas station employee that's making $10 an hour. Those are 2 very different jobs and 2 very different scenarios. And like the gas station employee person, it's in general, I mean, this is probably a stereotype, but in general, they're probably not going to have a high level of connection and probably not necessarily a high level of standard.
Right.
Obviously.
For themselves, are you saying?
Well, from both, but
Okay.
yeah, but I mean, their boss is not going to hold them to high standards.
Oh, gotcha.
If they're a cashier at a gas station, for example.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That makes sense.
So that's probably an unfair example, but I think the potential aspect is kind of a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
and especially a lot of our listeners aren't going to be current business owners, but
People who want to get in the game.
Yes, wanting to start their own businesses. Mm-hmm. If you're an employee, I think the potential factor is huge because, one, not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur to be successful. I think eventually that's always a good road, but it doesn't have to be the vehicle that drives you to success. I think there's a lot of different ways. And then once you pass certain thresholds, then you kind of jump into different things like real estate, owning businesses, whatever.
Yeah,
but that doesn't have to be what gets you past the over the hump to where you're free to be able to do some of these things. Mm-hmm. But I think I just want to know your thoughts on this. But potential in the perspective, let's say for the employee, if you're in a position or you have a job where there's no room for potential, how do you make that work? Or if you are in a position where there is potential, what are your suggestions, or how does that play into effect of your within the matrix?
So to make sure I understand it correctly,
sure,
you're saying I'm an employee,
yes,
and I'm like the gas station attendant where I don't have somebody else imposing high standards or really connecting with me at all. They're just kind of like, hey, do this, man, this, and you're good. Like, how in that situation do I get out of it? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, sure. I mean, because obviously, like, the answer is you could quit, but how does that have to be taken into account, or how is that factored into, as an employee or even an employer, but we're talking about an employee in this instance, of, your the health of the matrix, I guess, let's say.
I gotcha. Yeah. So I think, I don't know if this is the right answer.
Let me say it this way.
Okay.
Before we were talking about you at your old job and how you felt that there was a high level of standards and a low level of connection.
Yes.
And what you did to combat that was, hey, let me in the employee
side of things.
Let me try to push the connection to try to make this a great work environment for me.
Gotcha.
Let's go back to your specific scenario, because I think this fits better.
Okay.
How does potential factor into that, into your mindset with that? Because if you understand, like, in your particular situation with that job example, because I think there's a lot of people that experience things like that. If there was, a scenario where there was no potential or there was high potential for that, what are your thoughts on that, I guess?
And you're saying potential, define the potential real quick.
Potential for growth in the company, both
gotcha.
character and progression, for high level positions.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think that, so if I'm in that scenario, or just in general, if I think about, if I've ever felt stuck, right? And because I think at the end of the day, what happens is, even, let's say somebody, I'm in this position that you've made, and I don't know anything about this whole matrix thing or whatever, right? But you start feeling a little bit in your head, like that's when those thoughts of like potential for growth start to go away. You're like, gosh, I feel like I'm not growing here. I'm not doing this. I'm not this. Like, nobody's, so I've felt the point, before too, the opposite side, where I'm like, nobody's really holding me to anything. I could do whatever the heck I want.
Right.
And that's not a great position, or that's not a great feeling to feel as an employee either. Right. And so, okay, from the employer standpoint, I think the solution is, no matter what your business is, that you should have standards for every single one of your employees, from the top level C-suites all the way down to the most entry level position, like the cashier at the gas station or whatever. Right. And then when you are hiring your management team, like all the way through your organization, in my opinion, you should have standards held high and connection held high, no matter what it is. Right. We hear about some of these restaurant owners, like if you've heard of, who's the guy, Tillman Fertitta. He's the owner of the Houston Rockets, but he also, where he made most of his money was, I think it's called Langley, if I'm not mistaken, steakhouses, or it starts with an L, I think. Could be completely wrong, but it's a steakhouse, right? But he talks about like how, like, somebody drove into his parking lot. There is not a piece of trash out there. There is not a leaf on the premises. Every blade of grass is perfectly manicured like a golf course. Bushes, like everything from the outside to the inside. There is not a piece of trash on the floor, like everything. And what it subconsciously does to their customers is like, wow, this is an unreal experience, right? And so think about the leadership that had to trickle all the way down to get whoever the heck it is cleaning up that parking lot and cleaning up those floors and trimming those hedges and doing the grass to pay such close, precise attention to it. That's somebody who holds massive standards, but more than likely has some level of decent connection, right? Or they just pay those people a frick ton of money. I don't know, right? Because there's also some components there. So I think from an employer standpoint, I don't know if this necessarily answers your question, that it is very important. And especially if you're in a position like me where you're just, getting into that scaling phase, you have to make sure and put systems, SOPs in place or whatever in order to ensure that is being met, right? So that your company has that potential to grow. Now, if you're an employee in that situation, I think that's where a lot of discipline comes in to self-impose. If you have a manager, and I don't know if this is exactly where you were getting at, but imagine you have a manager that's not imposing, that has, like, you are the disengaged employee, but it's not necessarily by default, or it's not necessarily your choice or because you're a crappy person.
Right.
It's just you happen to fall. Yeah, it's the situation. So first of all, like you said, I mean, the easy answer is quit and go find something else. But if you want to sit there and make it work, I think you become, and the potential to grow within the company comes from you being able to self-impose your own standards and saying, hey, like, I'm a gas station attendant, but I'm going to make sure that every freaking person that leaves here, I'm going to be the best. Yeah. And every person that leaves here is going to leave with a smile or laughing, or their day, no matter how shizzy it was before they walked in my door, before they bought this Snickers bar, they're going to leave with a freaking, laughing out the door or something like that, or whatever it is. Right. And then, I guess in a way, like the way that I said the solution was connecting with people, right? It's interesting, right? How they're like, it really boils down to a lot of those two things. But I think at the end of the day, like, if you work on being the type of person that is receptive to standards, whether they are self-imposed or imposed externally, right? Because for me, and I think a lot of millennials out there, I've had a hard time with leaders who impose standards without the connection. But first of all, as an employee, or just building your reputation in general, which we talk about this a lot in the unicorn equation, but is like being able to be okay with standards. You know what I mean? And being driven and intrinsically motivated by standards, right? Like not just going with the flow, not just floating by and going by how you feel in a given moment, right? Tim Grover, who was Kobe's and Michael Jordan's trainer, he used to say, like, your mind has to be stronger than your feelings, right? Like we all are so emotional, and like we make like these feelings driven decisions all the time. But I think to really stand out in the marketplace and to really start commanding and being skilled enough to start commanding some serious income, whether you're an employee or an entrepreneur, like you got to be okay with standards, whether they are self-imposed or somebody imposing them on you, right? Because if you're an entrepreneur, the marketplace imposes standards on you. That's what I love about entrepreneurship, right? Or if you're an employee, oftentimes it's a manager or a boss that imposes those things on you. Now, the other thing that, the connection side of things, it's not a prerequisite. Like it's not required from the employee standpoint. I think everybody walks around like, my leaders should connect with me on everything. And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. And quite frankly, you're going to be pretty frustrated if you think that every manager is going to be as good of a leader that we've kind of talked about on this podcast today. Right. So I think it has to be the sort of thing where you say, hey, I'm not going to require my leaders to be an amazing person at just connecting with me all the time. I'm going to be okay self-imposing standards on myself if they don't impose them on me already. And I will constantly work on trying to find leaders that are going to connect with me in a certain way, or I'm just going to become an entrepreneur and I'll be the one that is the leader. That's ultimately the path that I chose. I've never looked back once since I decided to quit my job and go full hog entrepreneur. But I personally think, and I don't know if this answers that question exactly that you mentioned, but I think those are, if I put myself in those different shoes, how I'm thinking about that matrix and how it reflects to the potential for growth and the potential for ultimately creating that dream life. Hopefully that was semi an answer that you were.
I don't care if you answered the
for.
question. That was awesome.
Okay,
No,
cool.
I totally agree too. I think, yeah, I think that's huge. Being in a position of leadership or not, that it doesn't matter, but having the willpower and just the determination to self-manage, to self-manage and to lead yourself to where you want to go.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think that's huge.
Exactly.
And you can't overlook that. And for all the aspiring entrepreneurs out there, or anybody listening, or people who are entrepreneurs that are looking to get to the next level, the next step, it really comes from within.
Yep.
And you have to have the discipline to, look at your life objectively and do what it takes to get where you need to go.
Exactly. And yeah, and I think that's exactly right, man, is like, you have to learn. Obviously people talk about like, you're only going to get as far as like the mentors that you can find. Right. But also it's almost like you kind of got to learn to mentor yourself. That's kind of what that whole last little bit that I was talking about kind of comes down to, is like, learn to mentor yourself, learn to respect yourself enough to follow through and do the things that you say you're going to do, because your self-confidence goes way up when you do that. And that self-confidence exudes into all the other kinds of things. So it's, you really do have to learn to love yourself, connect with yourself, right? Learn to love yourself, because obviously a lot of our inner voices are pretty harsh on ourselves, right? But then also learn to self-impose those standards on yourself and say, hey, if I say I'm going to do something, if I say I'm going to make 50 sales calls today, I'm going to make 50 sales calls today. If I'm going to go do, I don't know, like whatever it is, like just do what you say you're going to do. Yeah. Because your brain will automatically stop believing in you if you stop doing what you say you're going to do.
You will lose respect for yourself.
You'll lose respect for yourself, whether it's conscious or subconscious, and that's happened to me, by the way, in the past. Like,
I think it's happened to everybody.
I think it's happened to everybody, but like full transparency, like there was a time where I said like, oh, I'm going to stick to this diet regimen, or I'm going to stick to this exercise plan, or I'm going to stick to this sales call plan, or I'm going to knock this many doors and door to door, or I'm going to dial the phone this many times at a software sales job, or whatever it was. And I wouldn't do it. And then I'd be like, oh, okay. And like justify something. But lo and behold, what started happening is I started trusting myself less and less and less. Right. So what I had to do to strengthen that muscle was first of all, I had to stop lying to myself and stop saying, like, if I knew I wasn't going to make 50 sales calls in a day, just say I'm going to make 5, and then do 5 or 6. Right. And at least you then kept the promise that you're going to make, even though it was a crappy goal or a crappy, promise. But by doing that, that ultimately helped me start to learn to essentially mentor myself into success, right? Very, very kind of an interesting concept, but
yeah, for sure.
Anyways, and if there's anybody listening to this right now that wants mentorship, that wants guidance on starting their business or whatever, make sure and click the link, whether you're watching this on YouTube or podcast or wherever podcasts platform that you're listening to this on. We have a free Facebook community called Build and Grow Your Profitable Digital Side Business. It's a way that you can learn digital skill sets that'll allow you to start whatever type of business in the digital realm that you want. If you already have a business that you're working on, affiliate marketing, drop shipping, whatever it is, we will teach you, true entrepreneurial principles that can help grow your business. If you don't have a side business, or you are looking into starting a side business and you want some good guidance on where to start, you can look into some of the business models that I've been able to be successful with. Make sure and click the link, come and join the group with us. We do live trainings, you get resources, free coaching calls with my expert team that will allow you to ultimately be successful and again, find kind of that mentorship that we talked about, leaders that are trying to do the best they can to help other people live that ultimate, dream life. So if that's something that you're interested in, make sure and click the link below. But for that, guys, we are done with this episode. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one.